We are out here at Parks and Forestry. How many of you have been out here before? And that's why we do these things. This team out here has done an incredible job of building this facility. They actually did a lot of the work themselves to make this building possible in a budget in which we could afford. And I think it's very important that I've said this last year, I think it's very important that you know the atmosphere and the environment and the operations of your colleagues. Because we're a cross-functional team, oftentimes you don't get to see where your fellow colleagues work and what they have to deal with on a daily basis. That's why I think it's very critically important that we get out of City Hall and get out of our offices and come to see where the real work and the boots on the ground operations happen. So thank you so much for hosting us tonight. How's the food? Okay, so there's a ransom to be paid for your time, and it's a good meal, and Chef Mike has done an amazing job with the food every year, and so we appreciate him. I was thinking about this the last couple days, what I was going to say, what I wanted to talk about, and I just kept on going back to where we were when I first became city manager to where we are today, and just the transformational change. Not every city in Michigan is experiencing what we're experiencing. They're not experiencing the stability, the growth, the radical investment and transformation of our local economy. They're not seeing that. So what was it that put our city apart, set ourselves apart, that would want more developers from all over the state to invest $500 million here in just the last 5 years, create 2,000 jobs? And what it was is our philosophy and our outlook. We believe that government isn't the solutions to all the problems that Port Huron faces. We believe that limited government and pro-growth policies are what creates stability, creates jobs, and creates prosperity. And we have worked really hard to create what I call vanilla ice cream government. We have stabilized our operations. We dealt with the daunting task of eliminating deficits. We dealt with the daunting task of addressing unfunded liabilities. The consequences of addressing our unfunded liabilities cannot be underscored, because a lot of the future investments that happen would never have been able to happen had we not addressed those ballooning costs. But I also want to recognize that that didn't just happen. It came from a lot of sacrifice from all of you all. And I want you to know that the mayor and council and the city manager recognizes the sacrifice that you all made to help address those major challenges. We've streamlined operations within City Hall. We've made City Hall a great place to come and do business. Pulling a permit, going through the process, City Hall should not be a roadblock. We should be a hand up and a helping hand. And we've really transformed the customer service experience. Whether you're coming into City Hall or doing it online or doing it digitally, it's a whole new customer experience for our residents. With that said, there are some things that government does that just doesn't get recognized, but would create crises if it didn't actually get done. And that's the work that all of you do. And today I want to highlight some of the amazing work going on within our operations and some of the unsung heroes who are getting that work done. Whenever something really good happens in the city, the mayor, the city manager, the department heads, we get to take a victory lap in the press. People know our names, they know what we do, but oftentimes the true credit goes to the folks who are actually completing the work and getting the job done. And I want to highlight the efforts of so many of you today, those who truly are making a difference in the community every day for our residents. So with that said, we have a few awards I want to give out today, and we're going to move quickly because of your time. I understand you're all busy. I want to pull this up real quick. Yes. In 2006, Jamie Cameron came to work for the city of Port Huron. He actually started out in the wastewater plant and transferred over to the water plant and became an operator. He does an amazing job at our water plant. But back this summer, on one seemingly normal morning, the sky started to fall. And we had a massive water main break in the city, went without water for about 3 days. Everyone remember that? We did the whole water distribution. Throughout that entire crisis, identifying that there was a problem, identifying where the problem is, working way through the solving that crisis, and then, believe it or not, just a few days later, having to provide millions and millions of gallons of water on demand to put out one of the largest fires in Port Huron history at our industrial park. Jamie Cameron oversaw all of that. Is Jamie here today? Oh, look at that, he skipped. Well, anyways, I want to recognize Jamie Cameron. So last February, I was put in a really tight situation. We found out that our management agreement for our marina with Atchison Ventures was coming to an end and actually had already expired, and we did not have a contract. And so we had to decide, could we renew our contract, which nobody really wanted to do, including that operations, or could we take back that operations within the city of Port Huron? Taking back those type of operations is a huge undertaking. To be quite frank, there was so much there I didn't know. I didn't even know what we were getting ourselves into, but I knew one person would know how to get the job done, and that was Michael Davenport, our harbor master, who worked for Atchison Ventures. So we onboarded Michael Davenport in March, and throughout the entire year, Michael Davenport has been able to onboard our entire marina operations, hire all the people there, continue the operations seamlessly, and have a record year within our operations. As you all know, this was the 100th year for the yacht races. We had record number, more than 300 yachts come to the city of Port Huron. The operation went flawlessly because of the work that Michael Davenport has done. So I want to recognize Mike Davenport. If you come up here. Thank you for your incredible and fast work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So this one's a little personal to me. I have 2 little girls, and the one thing they love is our amazing Parks and Recreation. The one thing that's really, really amazing about our Parks and Recreation is our pools. We have amazing pools that provide families in both the north and south end recreational opportunities, but also life-saving opportunities to learn how to swim. We are the blue water community, and kids learning to swim is literally a matter of life and death in this community. So our pools are really incredibly important to us. I want to recognize today Maggie Watson. If she'd come up here, where's Maggie at? Maggie does such an incredible job. She literally, come on up here. She is literally on her, I'll help you up, here you go. She is literally on her hands and knees cleaning the facilities at the pool herself to make sure that our families and our kids have an amazing opportunity in the summertime to experience water and learn water safety. And Margaret, I want to thank you so much for what you've done for our city.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I'll help you out. One of the things that's really important in our city is our quality parks and recreation. And the term recreation and parks changes greatly. We used to think recreation and opportunities is just the standard playground and green space. But now we realize that recreation is much more. And it's much more about entertainment, placemaking. And one of the key components to the rejuvenation and revitalization of downtown Port Huron has been the McMorran Plaza. The McMorran Plaza has a lot going on there, but one of the most important things in addition to the plaza and the arena and the civic theater is the food and the beverage and the people who manage that. It's a huge operation, but not only that, I want to recognize Misty Marsh today, because not only does she do an incredible job when we asked her to take over the arena and civic theater, then we dumped the plaza operations on her to provide food to the plaza, but she took it one step further, and she also oversees the food operations at Lakeside Beach to those thousands and thousands of visitors every single day. And in our parks and our recreation opportunities, those are economic drivers. So Missy, if you could come up here and take this. You have a ton on your plate. Thank you so much for what you do. Now the next person isn't here today, and I'm fairly confident it's because she knew this was coming. But community engagement with our police and fire is incredibly important, and it's very hard to sometimes bridge the gap between the uniform and the humanity. And one person who's done a tremendous job with that, and I can testify as a father, is Jackie Martin, our fire inspector. She has done an incredible job working within the schools under fire safety and fire education. My daughter knows her as Firefighter Jackie. So my daughter, when I come home, my daughter says, I got to see Firefighter Jackie today, and I know exactly who that is. And so Jackie Martin is out sick today, but we're going to honor Jackie Martin for the work that she's done with community engagement in our fire department. She's done an incredible job. The next up, Bob, why don't you come up here and help me with this one? One of the things that's really nice about our community is we have amazing amenities like our baseball fields and our softball diamonds and our parks and recreation. There is the pride of ownership in making sure facilities are beautiful and well maintained. Larry Moserak, is he here today? There, Larry, come on up here. Larry, the way it was put to me by your peers who nominated you was Larry gives every child in this community a major league experience. I want to thank you for your hard work to keep our facilities amazing. It does not go unnoticed. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Congratulations, bro.
By the way, Larry worked for the city way before I was elected, so if anyone says I wonder how we got that.
So it's the connection with the residents, and the most intimate connection, sensitive connection we have is with their kids, interfacing with their children on a daily basis. In the summertime, we have an important program called the Sports Crew. It teaches kids sports programs and how to play basketball and baseball and all the different activities. Lucy loves going to these programs. It's her summer highlight. But a young gentleman named Christian Phillips, is he here? Can you get me here, Christian? Come on up here, Christian. Christian has done a remarkable job of not only being their favorite sports crew leader, but he has done an incredible job of connecting with the parents of the kids and getting to know them and making them feel involved in the process. You're a younger guy, but you have the interpersonal skills of a very seasoned adult. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come back and to be with us today and all the hard work you've done in our program.
Thank you.
Thank you. So since 1990, I would have been 5 then, Brian Rubel has served the citizens of Port Huron. He's done an amazing job working on our wastewater plant, working his way up. He pretty much had every single job there. What people ask me what keeps me up at night, it's not if your city manager falls over dead. It's if for your operators and your leaders and your superintendents in the plants, something happens to them because it's a huge talent. Brian has so much experience, and this summer he went out of his comfort zone, and during our crisis, Brian came into the rescue and helped fix that massive main break in addition to his day-to-day operations. Brian, I want to come here and recognize your lengthy service. Thank you. 1990 is a long time.
Yeah, a little bit.
When we had the main break, without other hesitation, when we needed help, he just came out there and said, I can help you. And so we appreciate you getting us through that. You couldn't have done it without all your experience, but it does not go unnoticed.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a lot of random things that come up, and I get to see people work on an intimate basis every once in a while, but City Hall is a big place at night, and I come in really weird hours, late at night, on the weekends, and I came in a couple months ago, and nobody's in the building. So I'm just roaming around the building, and I had to drop something off on 3rd floor, and I look over in the engineering side of the building, and there's Casey working his ass off, cleaning the carpets, just going to town, working hard. Now, I like to think I'm a hard worker. But if I was in an empty building and nobody was watching me, I'm not quite sure I'd be going 110% all the time. But when nobody was watching, Casey was doing an incredible job making sure our building was in great shape for the operations and for the residents. But he didn't do it just alone. He had Ray with him and Jake Ballard. They do an incredible job. And it's not just in the MOC. We have asked these guys to do things all over the city. They pretty much get dropped in wherever we need them. They do an incredible job. And I want to recognize Ray and Casey and Jake, if you can come up here today. Now, this will make Jake, the first two-time recipient.
Back
This is for you, Ray.
Thanks, sir.
Casey, thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, man. And I got yours here too, Jake. Jake, right here, I got yours.
Appreciate it, James.
There you go. All right. Our downtown is a beautiful place. It is, I call it the epicenter. You got to fill the donut hole first. Everyone says, why did you focus on downtown first and then move your way out? And it's because you can't have a city without a heart. And the heart of a city is its vibrant and beautiful downtown. There's a significant amount of infrastructure there, including, believe it or not, 92 flower beds. And now, dozens and dozens of hanging flower pots and the maintaining. If you go through our downtown, it's immaculate. There's not trash on the street. It's clean. The sidewalks are clean. The flowers are beautiful. It didn't just happen. It happened because 3 individuals worked tirelessly throughout the summer to make downtown beautiful. And today I want to thank the DDA beautification team of Paige, Z, and Lauren, if they could come up here. Now they call you Z because no one can say your real name. So what is the real name?
Jambor.
Okay, we're not going to get that. That's not going to happen. We'll just keep calling you Z.
Perfect.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your hard work, guys.
Thank you.
Well, before we go today, I want to take an opportunity to share with you something that's been going on in my life for about 2 years that I think you should be aware of. Things I haven't talked about publicly, but I need to now. And it affects all of you, and you'll find out when I tell this story. But there's some days I have to decide how I'm going to speak to an audience, right? So there's some days I will speak to you as my friends and colleagues. There are other days I will address you as the employees of the city of Port Huron. Today I'm going to address you as my fellow citizens, okay? I want to share with you a story. I want to brief you on this. So in about a month, when you begin reading about this, and this becomes in the public eye, you will know the story behind it. And when I speak, you will know my reasons. When I act, you will know my heart. And I want to tell you this. So in March 2020, Jesse and I were on a cruise to the Bahamas. Well, on that cruise ship, I began getting media briefings about this COVID-19 virus, the coronavirus, which was emerging around the world. I remember one night, I was having a cocktail with an 80-year-old lady named Dottie, because we do Royal Caribbean, it's an older crowd. And Dottie just told me she got back from an Indo-China cruise. And I was literally like, oh God. I was like, geez, I just read about that, you know? So I was a little fearful. But at that time, no one knew much about it. So I came back to Port Huron, and within 3 weeks, the world had come to a stop. We had shut down. We were one of the first municipalities in the state of Michigan to close down. I remember when I met with my department heads, I said, this coronavirus thing, like, you know, people are saying we should shut down operations. So I'm thinking like the 2-week pause, the 14-day pause. Well, no one else in municipal government, anywhere in the county or anywhere in the state, had shut down yet. And so my thought was, one, I could delay closing city operations, and the pandemic comes to fruition, and hundreds of my employees die, or out of abundance of caution, I could be the first to close down city operations and go remote work from home. And I told my department heads I would rather look like an idiot than inadvertently kill my employees, because we just didn't know. We didn't know what was going on. So we closed down city operations, and we all bugged out, and that was something special. We bugged out for about, I think it was 30 days. And then we began doing COVID protocols to return into work, and that was incredibly expensive. We spent, I would say, I think it was $100,000 on microbial spraying. We'd go through at night and fog all the facilities, fog the police trucks, fog the fire patrol cars. If you go to my desk within my office, the enamel on my desk has actually been destroyed from the microbial fogging, destroying the varnish on the desk. We bought thousands and thousands of masks. We brought hand sanitizers. I remember people were dumping off tubs of hand sanitizer because you couldn't find it at the time. It was like the black market. One night I was on the phone with a Chinese broker to buy like $100,000 worth of K95 masks and ship them here. I wasn't sure it was legit or not. I thought, I'm gonna wire $100,000 and be out of it. I mean, you just didn't know what you were dealing with. But we all experienced the fear, the unknown, and the panic of what we were gonna do. So fast forward about a year later, I'd say, thanks to President Trump and Operation Warp Speed, vaccines became available. Vaccines became available. Now, if you remember, vaccines were hard to find. You couldn't get vaccines. In fact, when the first vaccines came out, only first responders qualified: police and fire, EMS, healthcare workers. The general public couldn't get them. And so we were the first city to negotiate with Kroger, and Kroger actually did the first of its kind on-site vaccine clinic within City Hall. We actually did 136 doses of the vaccine on that day. It was very hard to get, very proud of that. Remember, it was a 2-dose vaccine. I'm a big believer in the vaccine. My wife and I both decided to be vaccinated, and I sat for the first round, and I did a photo op, if you all remember, me taking the vaccine. And I thank the American healthcare workers and science industry for developing such a vaccine to protect us from the COVID vaccine. If you remember, at the time, they believed that if you received the vaccine, you couldn't get COVID and you couldn't transmit COVID, which we now know is false. That was false. So we got the vaccines. We did several rounds of vaccinations. We promoted them throughout the city. And then word was getting, people were getting frustrated, essentially. You got about 50 to 60% of the country that is taking the vaccines, and then there was a large vaccine hesitation. People who would not get the vaccine, which was an experimental drug on experimental approval from the FDA. And so rumblings out of Washington were that maybe a vaccine mandate was going to come down the line. So sure enough, in November, I believe it was, the President of the United States did a press conference. And he announced that OSHA had been directed to develop a vaccine mandate or test rule, administrative regulation. It was a vaccine mandate or test. Essentially, you had to force your employees to get a vaccine or implement a weekly testing protocol to keep your employees safe. The caveat was this is for all employers with 99 employees or more. 99 employees or more. Well, the city of Port Huron, we are one of Michigan's largest core communities. We actually have about 544 employees, if you count all our seasonals and part-timers. 544 employees. Which means we were going to have to make the decision. If the OSHA ETS rule went into effect, we would have to decide. Now, what's a little bit unique about the city of Port Huron is that all administrative, per our voter-approved charter, all rules and regulations governing employees and operations are the responsibility of the city manager. So as the city manager of Port Huron, I had the legal authority, and not only that, the legal obligation to make this decision for our operations of whether or not we were going to impose a vaccine mandate. I did not have the luxury, like other managers across the state, then punting that to the legislative body, just your decision to make. So I had to make that decision. We knew we had a little bit of time until it ramped up, right? Until we actually had to do it. I think the implementation time was going to be January. So we had a month or so before the hard deadline to make your decision. So I began hearing from employees. I began hearing from the general public. I talked to you in the elevators. You and I have had conversations. I remember walking the hallways. So are you going to force us to get the jab? Are you going to give us the jab? I knew employees that were going to resign and leave our operations if I force them to get a vaccine mandate. Specifically, police and fire, which already there was a shortage of police officers and firefighters in the state of Michigan. I knew employees that had called smaller municipalities who were less than 100 employees and said, hey, you're hiring a police officer. Can I transfer over my MERS time? Can I transfer over? Already making plans, should I implement a vaccine mandate, that they were going to leave. And so my concern was, if I did implement a vaccine mandate, how would I manage to run the fire and police departments and our operations with key people resigning for whatever was it, religious beliefs or personal beliefs or their own body and their own healthcare choices? So, whenever we take the oath of office, we all remember taking the oath of office for our positions. When we think about the enemy at the gates, I always envision the movie The Patriot, and where Mel Gibson is running across the field and just stabs the guy with the British with the American flag to save America. That's pretty much what I envisioned when I was signing up for. Like, you know, so help me God, if the British come, I got this. We're gonna protect the country and the Constitution. I didn't know the threat to liberty in the Constitution would come from within. I did not realize that. So my moment was not on a glorious battlefield carrying a flag. My moment was in a very quiet moment within my office where I had to make a decision. I had to decide whether or not I was going to force a vaccine mandate on my employees or whether I would implement a weekly testing option, which I will explain is a little bit more complicated than it sounds. My fellow citizens, if I'm ever forced to confront the options of whether or not to choose the Constitution and the protection of individual liberties, or implement a totalitarian, unconstitutional vaccine mandate, I will always choose the Constitution and the protection of individual liberties every time, so help me God. So the following day, I have to inform the staff of the decision that I made. So I'm going to read you an email that I sent to city staff informing them of my decision, which I was obligated to make and obligated to inform you of. And the email is this: City staff, I know there's been significant news and information floating around regarding the OSHA ETS and the forthcoming mandate for employers with 100 or more employees. Municipalities do not fall under the jurisdiction of OSHA. However, we do fall under the jurisdiction of my OSHA. And they will need to promulgate additional rules that they seek to include us in any future mandate. Hear me now. I will never enforce a vaccine mandate upon my employees. I took an oath in office to uphold the Constitution when I took this position. I will uphold my oath, come what may. I earnestly believe that one of the many federal judges across this country will issue an injunction soon, and I also believe that the U.S. Supreme Court will soundly reject the overreach of the administrative state. Laws are made by duly elected U.S. Congress, Senate, and they are signed by the President of the United States, not unelected bureaucrats. I hope I have made my position on this issue for you clear. Have a great weekend. James. What I meant by that email was, I was referring to the major questions doctrine, meaning the courts have long upheld that the administrative state does not have the ability to implement vast sweeping rules for all the American population. It's called the major questions. When there are major questions regarding the American people, it must be done through the duly elected legislative body and signed by the executive. Same where the city manager of Port Huron cannot write an ordinance for the city of Port Huron. I do not have the authority. The duly elected mayor and council must implement vast sweeping laws because the power is always held to the people and their elected officials. So now that I chose not to implement a vaccine mandate, I had to begin implementing a testing mandate, which means every week we would have to have a testing protocol where the employees who chose not to be vaccinated would have to be tested. Now, when you go home and you take an at-home COVID test and just look at it and toss it in the trash, that's one thing. But when you bring your snot to work, it becomes a little more complicated. When you take a biohazard, a swab, it is clinical in nature. There's bloodborne pathogen rules, and there's custody of all the testing. There's a whole protocol. So what I did is I drafted a OSHA-compliant testing policy, which is a draft testing policy. And then I went out and I purchased thousands and thousands of COVID testing kits to be able to facilitate the testing. And then I had to get a third-party clinical group that would actually administer the test. They would actually stand up a testing clinic that you could stop into, get your test. So I had implemented the testing policy, I had purchased the testing kits, and I had signed a contract with a third-party clinical firm to administer the test to all the employees on a weekly basis. That is the action that I took. I was surprised when a few weeks later, I received a letter from my professional association called the International City and County Management Association, the ICMA. They sent me a letter and said, hey, we're conducting an ethics investigation into you for possible violating our code of ethics. And I said, well, what have I possibly done? And they said, well, this email you sent to your employees. And I go, email about what? They go, the vaccine mandate. I go, what about it? They go, well, we think you're being unlawful. You're telling your staff you're not going to implement the law. And I said, no. You got it all wrong. The law was, I had the choice between a vaccine mandate and a testing policy. I chose the testing policy. So my legal team wrote an 11-page briefing in response and sent it to them and said, hey, here's all the facts. Here's a copy of the city charter. Here's a copy of our receipts from the testing. Here's a copy of our contract. Here's a copy of our testing protocol. Here's everything. Which I was surprised to find out, to receive another letter informing me that my professional association was going to publicly censure me for a Tenet 3 violation, which is breach of public trust. A Tenet 3 violation, a public censure for Tenet 3 is a career ender. No city manager has ever been publicly censured for Tenet 3 who hasn't been fired, resigned and disgraced, convicted, prosecuted, or jailed. It's one of the above. So they were treating me as if I had violated a federal law and I should be in jail. So we wrote them all the response. I said, hey, you can't do this. We wrote them, the mayor and council wrote them a letter saying you have this wrong. He has the authority to do this. This is within the law. They ignored all of it. And they issued a press release statewide and to all the Detroit media that publicly censured me for preemptively declaring to violate a specific law or policy when it's a manager's duty to do so. And that I lacked honesty and I lacked integrity. They put it all out there. The first phone call I got was from Jackie at the Times-Herald. James, what law did you break? I go, there was no law, Jackie. I didn't say I was going to violate the law. Well, that's what they wrote. I go, I get what they wrote. I tried clarifying it. I walked into the gas station the next morning to get my coffee, and there was the front page of the Times-Herald with my picture. And it said, city manager censured, dishonesty, unlawful, lacks integrity. That moment in Speedway was the most humiliating moment in my life. I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed to see my picture with that words. After 17 years of being a city manager, I was so humiliated. My wife called me from Walmart in tears a couple hours later and says, I'm at Walmart. Have you seen the Times-Herald? And I go, yes. She goes, why would they do this? There was no law. I said, I don't know. I don't know. Your perspective and outlook on life changes when you have kids. I never really knew that until I had 2 little girls. I have Lucy and Annie to think about now. That's my number one priority. And what makes me think about when I saw that newspaper is thinking, Lucy and Annie are not always going to be 6, and they're not always going to be 2. Soon they're going to be 13 and 16 and 17. And they're going to start to wonder what kind of father they have. They want to know more about their dad. Say something should happen to me and I die. What kind of father do they have? I cannot have my little girls read that their father was unlawful, lacked integrity, and was dishonest when that was patently, provenly false information. I sent a retraction notice, my legal team did, to the ICMA. We said, you have got this all wrong. We will give you an opportunity to retract and correct your statement. They refused to do so. They refused to do so. I was left with the worst decision I ever had to make. I mean, I've never had to make something like this. I've never sued anyone in my life. Don't want to be litigious, you know. But I have a public censure, as if the last person in Michigan who was publicly censured was a guy who was embezzling, corrupting contracts. He's still in federal prison, I believe. Was the last person to be publicly censured under Tenet 3. So they wouldn't retract it, and so to protect my reputation, to redeem my reputation, and to protect my family and my ability to provide for my family. I hope to be the city manager here for a long time, but the truth is, things change. I could get walked out the door. Maybe I want to progress in my career, but I can't have that on my record, a false statement like that. So I filed a defamation and civil conspiracy lawsuit against the International City Managers and County Management Association because they refused to retract what was provenly false. For the last 2 years, they have fought very hard to get this case dismissed. They tried to get it moved to a federal court. That didn't work. They tried to get it dismissed at the state courts. That didn't work. They cannot get rid of this trial. This case. We are going to trial next month in October. The trial will begin. During the process of discovery, we uncovered exactly what we already knew. Sworn statements called interrogatories and depositions. The people who organized the censure against me had no idea that the OSHA ETS provided a testing option. They had no idea that I had the charter authority to make such a decision. In fact, they believed that when MyOSHA filed that false citation on us that we won, they believed that was MyOSHA citing me for violating a vaccine mandate. They had no idea. They testified that they didn't even review my appeal. They never did any investigation into the veracity of the statements I was making. They never even looked in to say for a moment, did we get it wrong? What they did was literally the legal definition of reckless disregard for the facts. More concerning, our discovery proved what we already feared was that this was politically motivated hatchet job witch hunt. So, we are going to bring them to Michigan next month and put them in front of a jury, and we'll have the jury render a verdict. But I wanted to tell you what was going on, because it's going to be hard when you see what's this story about a trial on a vaccine mandate, because there's no vaccine mandate. But I want you to know that when I meant come what may, I meant three things when I said come what may in my email. One is there was a lot of pressure on those who were not getting vaccinated. If you remember, they were calling it the pandemic of the unvaccinated. And those who weren't getting vaccinated were selfish. And I knew that if I didn't implement a vaccine mandate, there would be some employees who were upset with me for that. And I understand that. But at the same time, I knew I had to protect individual freedom and the right to choose. The second thing I meant by come what may was cost. The cheapest, most cost-effective thing I could have done was implement a vaccine mandate. Because it's just get vaccinated or you're unemployed. Now I had to buy thousands of dollars in test kits. I had to pay thousands of dollars of a third-party firm to facilitate the testing, draft all this, and staff time to come do it. There's a tremendous cost to it. The third thing I meant by come what may is I knew that when I sent that email, I was making a decision that should no exemption be allowed, should no testing option is allowed, I would resign before I took those kind of civil liberties away from my employees. I would resign. After that email, the day after that email, ironically, a federal judge issued an injunction. And then just a few weeks later, the Supreme Court soundly struck down the OSHA ETS as unconstitutional, as we all knew it was. As we all knew it was. So there's your briefing on what's going to happen. Today I want to talk to Mark Ott, Jessica and Martha, and the ICMA Board of Directors. I am James Freed. I'm the city manager of Port Huron. And on behalf of my family, my wife Jessie, Annie and Lucy, we will see you next month here in Port Huron, and so will a jury of the American people. My fellow citizens, now we get to go forward, grateful for our freedom, faithful to our cause, and confident in the greatest nation the world has ever seen. I want to say God bless all of you. God bless the great state of Michigan, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.